The Commanders are putting a lot of trust in second-year quarterback Sam Howell. We talk about the Howell versus Jacoby Brissett competition and much more coming up next year on Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in with us, making us your first listen each and every day here on Locked On NFL. We're free and available, all podcasting platforms, including over in video form on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe for free, both in audio form and in video form. We're a 5-day-a-week NFL podcast here, so bringing in NFL news, analysis, updates, and so much more, bringing also the biggest stories throughout the entire week with our NFL experts from across our network. This episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Certain conditions apply. We're back and a very happy 4th of July week to everybody. I hope everybody's going to have a wonderful holiday surrounded by friends and family. Here today, though, we're going to be talking NFL on, again, a day that's creeping up. We're creeping up closer and closer to NFL training camp. We're going to have a lot of NFL conversation here. In the first segment, we'll be talking with David Harrison of Locked On Commanders about Sam Howell, how much trust the Commanders are putting in him in the Sam Howell versus Jacoby Brissett battle. Then in the second part of the show, Mike Debate will be joining us. We had Mike on a couple weeks ago from Locked On Patriots, and we talked to DeAndre Hopkins. We'll talk about the extensions that they ended up getting done with Devontae Parker, Jawan Bentley, and an update on those Hopkins and maybe even Dalvin Cook sweepstakes. Then in the final part of the show, Lorin Cox of Locked On Bears will be talking expectations for Justin Fields and that Bears team. So without any further ado, let's first get into our first conversation with David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. Well, the Washington Commanders have a lot of trust in one of their young quarterbacks in Sam Howell. Here to talk about that and more with me today is David Harrison, the host over at Locked On Commanders. And David, I know that with this whole thing, the Carson Wentz thing did not work out for them. And They move now to a younger option in Sam Howell. Now they bring in Jacoby Brissett. That's a veteran option for them. And there's all this talk about, the quarterback battle between Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett. Doesn't really seem like there is one. It seems like Sam Howell is their guy. They've had a ton of trust in him since the beginning of this offseason process. So when you talk about this Howell versus Brissett conversation, is there any shot Jacoby Brissett gets a real shot at this, or is it Sam Howell's job and that's that?
Yeah, I mean, Jacoby Brissett's not getting a shot at it. The only way he ends up being the starter is if Sam Howell gives him the job. You know what I mean? That's essentially how this is going to work. Now, that's not the official message, right? The official message from Coach Rivera. Coach Bieniemy hasn't really been asked about it all that much, to be quite honest with you. But the official message from Coach Rivera is that it is a competition, but Sam Howell's getting the first opportunity to win the job, which makes him QB1. And he has, since kind of said, like, he's QB1 entering training camp and all this other stuff. I don't know what the real motivation is, to be quite honest with you, Kevin. Like, I don't, like Sam Howell sees the press clippings, he hears people talking, like everybody knows he's QB1. He got all the first team reps in OTAs and mini camps. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the in-house media, when they interview him, they call him QB1. So I don't really know what the purpose is, to be quite honest with you. But what I do know is it doesn't hurt anything, right? Like Coach Rivera is saying, it isn't degrading anybody. It's not hurting anything. So I guess it's just one of those things you just leave alone. And he's got his reasons. And, he's been coaching in the NFL a lot longer than I have or ever will. So, just rely on his expertise there. But yeah, it's Sam Howell until Sam Howell shows that it shouldn't be Sam Howell.
Yeah. And to that point, I know there's a lot of conversation about, what has he shown? How much trust should there be to give him this starting job right now? So they obviously have all the trust in the world, all the confidence in the world in him. But in your estimation, David, based off of what you've seen, what you've heard from OTAs and minicamp, how much trust should they actually have in Sam Howell right now?
Yeah, I mean, giving trust to him, I think it starts off with the evaluation. And obviously Eric Bieniemy wasn't in Washington when this evaluation period was going on. But we have, rumors on the wind that we trust enough to go forward and say that we believe the Washington Commanders had a second round evaluation on Sam Howell. There's a little bit like there's some rumors that some people had a third, some people had a second, but I think if you average it out, call it 2.5, whatever you want to call it, they had a day 2, grade on Sam Howell, it appears, and essentially bypassed drafting him until the 5th round because they had Carson Wentz sitting there. And the last time a team had Carson Wentz and drafted a quarterback in the 2nd round, things didn't go so well for Carson Wentz and that team until that 2nd round pick eventually won a Super Bowl. Now, maybe the Commanders went to the Super Bowl. Maybe the Commanders should have drafted in the 2nd with that knowledge. But anyway, that's hindsight. So essentially, that's the reason they passed on Howell as much as they did. They got to the 5th round, called Carson, said, look, dude, this has nothing to do with you. This has everything to do with what we believe in this guy. We got to make this move. We can't hold off any longer. And Carson, whether he really believed it or not, he just kind of said, okay, fine, that's great. But the Commanders did a good job, I think, in balancing the aesthetic of it. Obviously, it's a 5th round pick. And then they made him the 3rd string quarterback, inactive on most of the game days until Carson's injury and all these other things transpired. But, if you have that high of a grade on a guy, if he's a 2nd or 3rd round pick coming into this year, you're almost expecting him to be the starter, right? Like there really wouldn't be a question about it. So when the rest of the NFL world is kind of looking at it saying, they're making a 5th round quarterback, their starting quarterback, the Commanders are looking at it as like, we're making a day 2 quarterback, our starting quarterback. So it's just a difference of opinion and that. And then since the execution has begun, really Sam Howell has done nothing but reinforce the belief that the team has had in him, that he can be the starter. The greatest phrase that new assistant head coach, offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy has said to us that he loves about Sam is that Sam autocorrects. And it was amazing because it's like the first time I've heard autocorrect used in a proper or in a positive light, right? But it really does happen, and you see it. And it actually, the story I love to tell about this comment from Eric Bieniemy is the final drive, the final 11-on-11 we had in mandatory minicamp for the Washington Commanders, where one play, Sam Howell throws a right corner route. It's a crossing route into the right corner of the end zone during red zones. He leaves the ball short. Troy Apke comes up with the interception. Jahan Dotson is too far ahead of the ball to make a play on it. They come back 2 snaps later. So Sam hasn't been on the sideline. He hasn't got any coaching. He's literally just him and his teammates on the field. He throws a similar type route to the exact same spot on the field, this time to Dax Milne, and he puts the ball in the perfect spot, and they score a touchdown to walk off the minicamp. That is auto-correcting to a T, and it's happening in the moment. Usually, quarterback throws an interception, they get, 10 minutes of real time, Kevin, to go and sulk over it, look at the picture, talk to the coach, have a teammate pat him on the back, drink some Gatorade, get back on the field. Sam Howell did this about a minute and a half later. So that auto-correct ability from a second-year quarterback is fairly rare, and it shows why they have confidence in him.
Yeah, ton of maturity from him as well in that regard. But David, I'm curious to hear what your overall evaluation of him is right now. You mentioned the auto-correcting of him, but how high are you as him as the starting quarterback of the Commanders?
From the work that we can evaluate, incredibly, right? And I say it that way because I think it needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Like, we've only seen him play one NFL game, and it's against the Dallas Cowboys team that had their seed locked up. They had nothing to gain. They weren't going to lose anything. Let's be honest. I think everybody watching that game probably says the Cowboys win at about 70 to 75%, right? But the throws that Sam Howell made still very, very impressive. The runs that he made, the decisions that he made, still very good. Threw an interception in that game, which I actually look at as a positive because he came back from that interception very strong. And then you see the mentality. And I tell my listeners this all the time. I had to talk to Sam Howell all throughout last year as a backup quarterback. And then coming into week 18, he's made the starter. And honestly, I said, okay, this week talking to Sam is going to be different. You know what I mean? He's a starting quarterback now. He's got more on his mind, all that stuff. So we go in the locker room, the first day of locker room availability, and Sam walks by me. And usually this is about the moment where I go to Sam and we just kind of shoot the breeze a little bit. No official interviews, just kind of, 2 guys talking. And I said, I'm going to leave him alone. He's QB1 this week. It's a different ball game. I'm going to leave him alone. Well, he comes up to me and says, hey, what's up, man? You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, so I guess we're still doing this. And he's the same dude, right? So then we go through this whole offseason and the QB1, and he's getting all the interviews and all the talk and all the hype. And I'll be completely honest with you. We actually had talked about him coming on my show during the offseason. Then the QB1 stuff started happening. I was like, maybe we back off that a little bit. Just, let him get used to the lay of the land. Come into OTAs, come into minicamp, talking to him. He went to the podium, but also talking to him on the side. He's the same dude. And I think when you talk about mental maturity, like power, position, status, attention, those things change people. Sam Howell has been the same guy from the 3rd string quarterback to the starting quarterback. His personality and the way he approaches everybody that he deals with has not changed. And I think that speaks tons about his mental ability. And right now, that's the best thing that we can say about him.
Yeah, and I know that first you want someone like Sam Howell, second-year guy, to have that maturity already, have that mental maturity. So that's awesome that he's the
Yeah.
same guy. But David, let's talk a little bit about the running backs now. Obviously, Brian Robinson came in there and his incredible story last year,
Yeah.
taking over the starting job essentially. Antonio Gibson is kind of in this weird spot right now with them. I don't
Yeah.
really know what his role is, but there have been some rumors about Kareem Hunt and his
Mhm.
potential fit with the Commanders. Could he come into the Commanders? How would you feel about that move if it happened, and how likely do you think it is to happen?
I would love it. I don't, how likely is it to happen? I'd say it's probably like a 6.5 out of 10. You know what I mean? I think there is a need there because while you love Brian Robinson Jr. and the potential, you love AG and what he does on the field, especially last year, getting a lot more involved in the passing game than we've really seen since he transitioned from being a collegiate receiver to an NFL running back. I think the potential is through the roof. Why you really like it from a strategic standpoint is when you realize that Antonio Gibson has never played an NFL season without an injury. And I know it's the running back position that's kind of a no duh situation, right? But even though, like, if you were to look at the stat box, you would tell me AG hasn't missed that many games. What are you talking about? But when you realize how many games he played through injuries, that likely would have sidelined him if they had more options to put out on the field. Like, there are literally situations where he probably would have been shelved if they had anybody that, let's be honest, they had that a lot of confidence in, or even a decent amount of confidence in. They just weren't there for the most part. Last year, you kind of see Brian Robinson come in. J.D. McKissick could have been that guy, but back-to-back seasons with severe neck injury issues, like basically his career has been kind of put on hold until he can get that whole thing figured out. There's just not a lot of depth in this running back room beyond those top two guys. So if you bring in Kareem Hunt, obviously you can spread the ball, you can spread the snaps around a little bit, and that'll help keep everybody healthy. And I think the great thing about those running back rooms, they really do adopt the attitude of running backs coach Randy Jordan, who has told us, he tells the guys, he's got a motto in his running backs room: I don't care about your stats as an individual. I only care about the running back room doing what we need to do to make sure this team is in a position to win. And those players adopt that mentality. Brian Robinson, if he sees Antonio Gibson punch the ball in from 1 yard out, the fans go, what are you doing? Why is AG in there instead of B-Rob? B-Rob's happy. Antonio Gibson, if he sees Brian Robinson take a screen 20 yards, the fans are going, why are you passing to Brian, pass to AG? But AG's excited for him, right? So that's how that running back room is. Kareem Hunt, we know, is a veteran with talent, adopts that backup, change of pace role. So he would be a smooth fit into this room. And yeah, I mean, for your fantasy team, you know what I mean? Maybe it knocks Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson down the draft board a little bit, but for the actual guys on the field, they would absolutely welcome him with open arms, and Eric Bieniemy would just have one more toy to play with in this offense.
Huge shout out to David for his insight on the Commanders, and for more on David's work, be sure to check out the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the second part of the show, Mike Debate will be joining us talking Patriots, Devontae Parker, Juwan Bentley, DeAndre Hopkins, Dalvin Cook, and a lot more you don't want to miss. So be sure to stay tuned here on Locked On NFL. But first, this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And me personally, I've used LinkedIn Jobs for a ton of things throughout my life. It's helped me out a ton. And it's super easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs. And all you have to do is add your purple hashtag hiring frame to the LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. There's simple tools you can use, like screening questions, to make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience. You can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you would like to hire. It's really important also to start the year strong and also finish it strong, so the right team member can help you do that. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here, our second segment, Locked On NFL Monday edition. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you as we continue talking NFL. We talk with David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. Now Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots will join us to talk about extensions, DeAndre Hopkins, Dalvin Cook, and a lot more now. With New England Patriots, they've been linked to DeAndre Hopkins, to Dalvin Cook, but they took the last week to extend some of their own guys here. And here to talk about that with me, Mike Debate, the host of Locked On Patriots. And Mike, I know we talked a couple weeks ago about DeAndre Hopkins and that move and how likely it potentially could be for New England, but the Patriots decided to extend one of their own receivers in Devontae Parker, 3 years, $33 million. How surprised were you that they got this done now, and how'd you like the money and specs based off what he brings to the team?
Yeah, I mean, for Devontae, it definitely was a little bit of a surprise, Kevin. There's no question about it. Usually around this time, teams are on vacation. There's not much going on in the front office. They're building, they're thinking about what they're going to do to open up training camp. But with this, especially with Devontae Parker's extension, I think it sent a clear message that the New England Patriots are serious about having a guy, or at least a couple of guys in that roster that can make contested catches. They haven't had a guy like that in quite some time that can be a red zone threat. They went out and got Mike Gesicki at the tight end position. I expect him to be very competent in that area. But this is where Devontae Parker shines, even though last year injury kind of kept him off the field a little bit more than I think he wanted to be. He still went up, grabbed 10 contested grabs. Each one of those receptions led to 20 or more yards. The New England Patriots know that if they want someone that can make an attack at the point of the catch, he's the guy to do it. And I think in a lot of ways, it's a vote of confidence for Devontae now to go out there and to be able to play the X receiver role, something he didn't get a chance to do a whole lot of last year because of injury. And the other part of that was just poor game planning on the coaching staff. So a fresh start for him, and we'll see what he can do with it this year.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are excited about Devontae Parker. He had that huge game against the Ravens where he had like 30 plus yards per catch, and I'm like, what's going on here? But it wasn't just offense, Mike. Defensively, the Patriots also get one of their own back, or at least bring him back for multiple years. Juwan Bentley, 2 years, $18.75 million. Now I know that maybe every NFL fan doesn't know who Juwan Bentley is, but he's been a solid player for New England. And how excited were you that they got him back on the deal that he got?
I was really excited to see this and really happy because Juwan is one of the great guys on this team, players that consistently give 110%, and they're leaders on the field and off the field. And that counts as much for the on-field prowess that he gives, and he does give quite a bit of it. But the respect that he commands in the locker room and his ability to direct traffic and be that defensive play caller, the guy that wears the green dot on the back of his helmet, Juwan Bentley is someone that inherited those duties from Patriots legends like Dante Hightower and Devin McCourty. Juwan Bentley falls into role in that. And this is not something that's brand new for him. He's worn the communication device a lot throughout his first couple of years in the league, ceded the captainship back to Dante Hightower in 2021, but he's going to come in now as the unquestioned guy, that leader in the middle part of that defense. And because of the role that he's going to play, it's going to allow and facilitate so many of his teammates to play in proper position. This was a great move for the New England Patriots, and extending him to a deal up to $18.75 million. This one has a chance to be a bargain for the Pats.
Now, are there any other extensions, the guys who are extension eligible now, that you could see the Patriots maybe getting done before the season, or do you think these were the two big ones that we're going to see?
Well, the big three right now that are concerns for Patriots fans especially are Josh Uche, Kyle Duggar, Michael Waynu. These guys have contracts coming up. They're all blue chip, top level athletes, and you really would love to see all three of them back in the fold. I don't know how realistic that necessarily is. The Patriots typically don't do extensions during the season, but they've done it under Bill Belichick, so there is precedent there before. However, it's going to be unlikely, I think, for them to strike a deal before the season begins. Uche realizes that he had a great season last year, set a career high in sacks. He's up, if he plays up to par, to really put himself in a position to get a serious contract offer in the offseason. Duggar is the same way. He might not illuminate the national highlight reels like a lot of people would like him to. But if you ask people in this area, in this region, guys on the Patriots beat, they'll tell you that Kyle Duggar is as valuable, if not more valuable, than anybody on that roster. I think the Patriots make every effort to try to re-sign him. Michael Waynu is their top offensive lineman. It would be a huge blow to see him walk away. But Waynu right now stands to inherit a very, very big time contract offer if he hits the open market. You've seen it. I've seen it. We've all seen it. Guards, tackles, they can clean up in free agency. I'd be surprised to see him take something early on unless he really, really is serious about wanting to be here and nowhere else. My guess is Uche and Duggar, they try. If they can't, that will table until the immediate part of the season is over. And I think Owenu, you're probably looking at something closer to the start of free agency. And if the Patriots can't work something out, he may be on his way out. And they drafted a lot of guards to make sure that, you know, they've planned for contingency just in case Michael Owenu does seek greener pastures elsewhere.
Yeah, I know the saying throughout the league, you can't keep everybody in a lot of these circumstances. So hopefully the Patriots will be able to get something done with all three. And I know that every team throughout the league has been the beneficiary of that, signing other guys. I mean, Matt Judon in Baltimore is one of those. The Patriots got him. They just couldn't keep everybody in Baltimore.
Right.
Hopefully the Patriots can keep their guys, though. But Mike, we talked about the Patriots' own guys and, DeAndre Hopkins, Dalvin Cook. They're not Patriots. They're guys from the outside they could bring in. Is this maybe setting up for a move for New England to get a Hopkins or a Dalvin Cook, or do you think they're done?
It could be. I mean, I think the Patriots are still very serious players in the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes. Everything we hear from the national side, from the local side, indicates that these two entities are very committed to trying to at least consider each other very highly. I don't want to say work something out because then it makes it sound like, oh, well, they're just hammering out details. I don't think we've gotten to that level yet. DeAndre has been very vocal, or his camp has been very vocal, that he'll probably get something in place close to training camp, which leaves a couple of weeks now in between for the Patriots and the Titans possibly as well. Tennessee is in on this, or maybe even a mystery team lurking through the back. Maybe a team well. Who knows? Maybe the Baltimore Ravens are going to toss their hat into the ring here. There's always possibilities with DeAndre Hopkins. So I think the Patriots right now are keeping their options open there. Cook, I think, is much more of a long shot. I think he's more of a zone runner on the inside, maybe even a little bit on the outside. That's not the Patriots' bread and butter. But look, Dalvin Cook is a top-level talent in this league. If he's looking to find a new home and he's been vocal about wanting to come to a team where he can make a difference, he'd make a difference in New England. There's no question about it. And I know the Patriots brass is very impressed with him. So I would say Hopkins is somewhat likely. I would say Cook is less likely than that, but neither one of these are impossible. But one thing I can tell you is the moves that the Patriots have made the last couple of days will facilitate them sweetening the pot on these deals, but they weren't necessary in order to get them done. I think the Patriots are doing these deals with this in mind, but I think they have loftier goals, probably to extend one of their own or trying to look at contract restructuring that they can do to help create additional cap space throughout the season. So I don't think the extensions were exclusive to getting a deal done with D-Hop or with Dalvin Cook.
Mike, with the Patriots analysis on point as always, and for more on Mike's work, be sure to check out the Locked On Patriots podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll be talking with Lorin Cox of Locked On Bears about Justin Fields and a lot more still planning to come here on Locked On NFL. We're back here, our final segment, Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. Thank you again for tuning in with us, making us your first listen each and every day, 5 days a week. Be sure to subscribe, audio and video form for free. Lorin Cox of Locked On Bears will join us now, talk about Justin Fields and a lot more. Let's get into it. Well, the Chicago Bears had the number one pick and then traded it to get DJ Moore and some other assets. And here to talk about expectations for Justin Fields and the Bears with me is Lorin Cox, the host over at Locked On Bears. And Lorin, I know people in Chicago are very high on Justin Fields, at least most of them. Most of them are high on Justin Fields. What have you seen or heard from Fields so far during OTAs, during minicamp, that gives you cause for concern, but also gives you cause for optimism?
Yeah, so certainly OTAs is a time of, you're throwing on air, you're not in pads. It's not always something that you can replicate perfectly into the regular season, but we're seeing the Bears certainly put a bigger emphasis on passing the ball this time of year. I think last year in year one under Matt Eberflus and Luke Getsy, the offense, they were trying to get the running game installed and more like foundational stuff, and now they can expand a little bit more and try and open things up. So, they're trying some new things with some new wide receivers. You mentioned DJ Moore. Also, Chase Claypool came during last season, so he wasn't here during last OTA. So this is really the first complete offseason with both of those two wide receivers now in the fold. It's been a lot of Fields to Moore. Those two have been forming a very quick connection to really have that true number one wide receiver in this offense. And it's just been a matter of sort of getting on the same page and tweaking those things here and there. So there's going to be some balls in the dirt at some times. And it's not necessarily because it was a quote unquote bad play by Fields, but it's just, guys get on the same page and learning the offense and learning how fast you get to different spots. So generally it's been positive. Generally it's been steps and progress forward, but OTAs aren't always a great measurement of how that's going to translate into the regular season.
Right. I think when you get into the offseason workouts, it's the prime overreaction time, both ways, both positively and negatively for a lot of players. But what are your expectations this year for Justin Fields, Lauren? Where do you want to see the growth? Because now he has DJ Moore, Chase Claypool. I mean, hopefully it works out on the field for him. But what do you want to see out of Fields this year?
Yeah, to me, it's about progress, right? It doesn't have to be the Jalen Hurts MVP level jump in order for it to be a successful step forward for Fields. Like the bar is pretty low where he's working from, so like a lot, it's going to be hard to not have any sort of progress. So how to find like the right amount of progress is a little bit hard to tell. But I think what we learned last year with Fields in particular in the passing game is that it's not always going to be something that we can measure by the box score in terms of the progress that we see from him this year. Like he could easily throw for 1,000 more yards and still finish 30th in the NFL in passing among quarterbacks. And on in the rankings, that looks like a bad season from Fields. But if he threw for 3,200 yards and 20 or some odd touchdowns and the Bears win 8-9 games and have, take a big step forward, like all of a sudden, does it matter how many yards were on the box score there if he's still able to help them win with his legs and the offense is scoring enough points? So to me, it's hard to set like a true measurable number, but it's more like, does it look like he's passing better? Does the offense operate more effectively in the passing game? And does it look like the steady type of progress from him individually that we've been looking for, even if maybe the box score isn't, 4,000 yards, MVP caliber type of season?
Right. You could honestly go back to what Lamar Jackson in Baltimore was, where, he wasn't necessarily throwing for all these yards per game, but he was leading the Ravens to win. And people are like, oh, well, Lamar is terrible because, he only had 115 passing yards. I'm like, okay, he had 150 rushing yards and the Ravens won the game. Like it's almost the exact same thing in Chicago with Justin Fields. And to that point, Lauren, you mentioned the Bears wanting to seemingly throw the ball more this year. What do you expect from Chicago run pass wise and how they kind of divvy up those snaps?
Yeah, it's hard because it's going to be something that, even though the play might be called a pass, the actual like statistical outcome at the end becomes a run. So then how do you measure like the play call versus the play result as a product there? And I think for the most part, you're going to see the Bears still want to be a run emphasizing team. Like you do still want to make Justin Fields' job as easy as possible, right? Like you don't want to have to ask him to throw 40, 50 times a game and take everything on his shoulders that way. So the more that you can run the ball with Khalil Herbert and Dante Foreman, and not that you want to take the ball out of Fields' hands, but at the same time, you want to make his job and his responsibility a little easier.
Yeah, but Lauren, let's talk about the defense a little bit now. Some promising young pieces there. They traded away Roquan Smith and they go out there and decide, hey, you know what? Let's go sign Jermaine Edmonds and get another one of those top inside linebackers in the league. How are you feeling about their defense this year?
It's better than last year, but how much is going to be a real question here, mainly because the pass rush is a massive, massive concern. They do not have any sort of like proven consistency in the pass rush department. I mean, no one has had more than 7 sacks in a season in their career. And some of those were like career years. And most of these guys are more like 3-4 sack a year type guys coming off a year, where they already had traded Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith, like you said. So they were pretty deficient in talent there. You feel like the back 7 is really solid with 2 new veteran linebackers. They like some of the other young guys they have at that spot. The secondary is young, but coming together with a lot of high draft picks, 4 second-round picks, and Eddie Jackson is the entire secondary back there. So like those guys should keep growing into bigger and better roles, and you feel good about them. It's just if they have to cover all day because the pass rush isn't getting home, does that start to make some of those younger guys like Kyler Gordon and Tyreek Stevenson, Jaquan Brisker maybe look a little worse because they're just being asked to do a little bit too much? So much is going to hinge on what the pass rush they're able to produce, and if between now and week 1 they add some sort of veteran or some sort of outside player to bolster that group.
Yeah, and I know, Lauren, the NFC North is going to be such a weird division this year, I think. Where do you feel like Chicago kind of slots in right now?
Yeah, it does feel like a little bit the most wide open NFC North that we've had in a long time, but it's not like the Bears are primed perfectly to take it this year. Like the Bears' long-term plan has been like kind of 2024. Like it takes a while to turn over the roster. Like this year is supposed to be get better. And then next year is like, all right, let's hit it. Let's try and shoot for the moon here. So I think there's a team that if things go really well, if they get some luck, they could compete for a wild card playoff spot and be, maybe competing for the division title or second or the division. But I think more likely they're going to be at a little below 500 right around there. And that's going to be good for third, maybe fourth in the NFC North. Kind of depends, if Green Bay's hovering that area where they go, or if the Vikings or Lions have a random drop off, the Bears could move a little higher up. But I think the Bears are fairly stable in where they're going to be around that 500 mark. And then it's just a matter of how well everybody else slots in around them. And I'm, third-ish seems about right for them.
Huge shout out to Lorin for joining me here today. And for more on Lorin's work, check out the Locked On Bears podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On NFL here today. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, more NFL content from your Tuesday hosts. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On NFL.